Okay, so let's just jump right in. We're all constantly scrolling through headlines, right? Conflicts here, political drama there, cultural tensions everywhere. It can feel, well, chaotic. But what if all those separate pieces are actually part of a bigger picture? Today, we're going to break down a very specific worldview, one that comes directly from our source material, which sees all of today's global events not as random chaos, but as signs pointing to a prophesied future.
And really, this is the big question at the heart of it all. It's a pretty powerful idea, isn't it? The thought that history isn't just one random thing after another, but that maybe, just maybe, it's following some kind of script. So let's dig in and see exactly how this perspective tries to piece together the puzzle of our world today.
All right, first up, a prophetic worldview. So where do you even start with something like this? Well, it begins with a fundamental shift in how you look at the news. Instead of seeing random noise, this viewpoint sees specific, meaningful signals, what the source material calls signs of the times.
I mean, take a look at these headlines. On the surface, what does an Israel-Syria talk have to do with student visas in the US or flags at a cathedral in Finland? They seem totally disconnected, right? But from this prophetic viewpoint, they're not random at all. They're actually part of a pattern. The sources argue that these kinds of events are significant because they seem to line up with specific biblical descriptions, particularly that recurring theme of a world crying out for peace and security.
Okay, now let's bring this down from that big global view to something much more personal. We're going on the ground in Israel. Because to really understand this perspective, the source material zooms right in on the raw, first-hand experience of a soldier on the front lines. This is where the framework gets grounded in a very real human story.
683. Just think about that number for a second. For most of us, it's just a number. But for Sergeant Major Chaim Malespin, an IDF reservist featured in our sources, that's how many days he'd been deployed on the front lines, back to back. This isn't just about counting days. It's about understanding the deep human reality behind the headlines we're exploring.
So Malespin serves in a unit called Ya Holam, and it's really important to understand who they are. This is an elite special missions unit. We're talking about the specialists who get called in for the absolute most dangerous jobs. Things like navigating and destroying complex tunnel networks, dismantling explosives, and, what's so crucial to this story, high-stakes hostage rescue missions.
And this quote from him, it really gets to the heart of how he sees their mission. He uses this incredibly powerful metaphor of a shepherd. So for him, it's not just a military operation. It's framed as a sacred duty, this deep responsibility to rescue someone who's been taken, no matter what the risk is.
So, to help an outside audience, especially a Western one, really grasp this deep-seated drive, Malespin gives this really interesting analogy. He says, hey, stop thinking of the Jewish people as a modern Western nation for a second. Instead, think of them as an ancient people, kind of like indigenous tribes like the Cherokee or the Navajo. And when you do that, it completely reframes things. Suddenly, the profound importance of burial customs, or that powerful, almost primal instinct to rescue one of your own, no matter the cost, it starts to make a different kind of sense.
Now, on top of all his military duties, Malespin also founded a humanitarian aid center, and its focus is on something called Aliyah. The sources explain this term literally means ascent, and it refers to the emigration of Jewish people from all over the world back to the land of Israel. And here's the key connection. They identify this as a central promise of restoration mentioned hundreds of times in the Bible. So his actions today are seen as directly linking back to that broader prophetic story.
Okay, so we've seen the on-the-ground perspective. Now, the sources pull the lens way back out again. They argue that the physical fighting, that's only one part of a much larger battle. This is about a war for hearts and minds, a war of information. This is a really crucial point in the source material's argument. The claim here is that conflicts like 9/11 or October 7th are not a reaction to something the West or Israel did. No, the argument is that the root cause is an ideology itself, a set of teachings that are spread through indoctrination, something that exists completely on its own, independent of any outside actions.
So if indoctrination is the cause, then what's the delivery system? Well, it's propaganda, used as a primary weapon of war. The sources draw a direct historical line here, from someone like the Nazi propagandist Joseph Goebbels in World War II, to what they describe as modern disinformation campaigns that are actively shaping how the public sees the current conflict.
Okay, now to back up this argument about ideology. The source material presents a really specific theory. It comes from a figure they cite, a South African missionary named Dr. Peter Hammond, and as you can see here, he proposes this multi-stage model.
He claims that as a country's Muslim population grows, you can expect to see specific shifts in societal dynamics, step by step. Now, it's really important to stress, this is presented in the sources as his theory, based on his observations, and he argues that the ultimate goal is political.
All right, so after laying all of this out, the prophetic signs, the personal duty, this information war, what's the point? What's the so what? This brings us to the call to preparation. What is the ultimate takeaway from all this, according to the sources?
And this is maybe the most important distinction the sources make. They are absolutely adamant that the purpose of all this prophecy is not about prediction. It's not about trying to circle a date on a calendar for the end of the world. In fact, they strongly warn against that. Instead, they say the whole point is preparation. It's about being ready, spiritually and mentally, and focusing on what you're doing right here, right now.
So at the end of the day, what's the final message here? It's that this worldview isn't meant to make you afraid or cause you to panic, actually quite the opposite. The stated goal is to encourage people to be informed, to see the world through this specific lens, and to basically stand firm in their faith, trusting that there's a bigger plan unfolding. And that kind of leaves us with one final, bigger question, doesn't it? Stepping back from any single belief system. How do our own deeply held worldviews, whatever they may be, shape how we see what's happening in the news? We've just walked through one very specific framework, and it really highlights how these internal maps we all have can give structure, meaning, and even a sense of purpose to what can otherwise feel like the random, chaotic events of the world.